Week 5 was an amazing slate for college football, and it lived up to the billing of Week 1. Let's be honest here. But now that we're at the midway point of the season, it's time to start seeing how these teams are doing. It's time to throw in some feelers out. I'm Darius Brockett, and here's my midseason vibe check. Clemson by far has had one of the most disappointing seasons that we've all anticipated. Look at the roster, look at the talent. Having a Heisman hopeful in Cade Klubnik and having a defense that's littered with first round talent and second round talent to boot, one has to ask ourselves, what is going on with Clemson? Currently, they're sitting at 1-3, 0-2 in conference play, and it's one of those major slip ups that kind of remind us of Florida State or even any team rather that has so much hype going into the season that everyone deemed the ACC champions by the time we get to the end of this season, but now seems to struggle. And I look at this roster and I look at this team that goes, it's still manageable, it's still doable, but it's hard to have a roster assembled like this and play with this much struggle. This team has struggled to barely score 21 points in all of its games. And we let the first game slide. When you lose to LSU, we saw how good that Blake Baker defense was. We saw how good that offense was under Gary Nussmeier at the helm at quarterback, returning. We saw all that, and we were willing to go, okay, it's a non-conference loss. You can bounce back from that. But then you lose to Georgia Tech on a last-second field goal. And then when you play against Syracuse and Fran Brown, it doesn't even look like you belong there. So one has to ask ourselves, and for Clemson Tiger fans alike, how are you guys feeling and what's going on? Now, as I say all this doesn't mean the season isn't manageable, but it is very unlikely that we'll see this team in the playoffs, barring them going on a crazy run and winning the ACC is the only way they can get in. But when you look at the resume that they've built so far, 1-3 isn't going to cut it. And assuming if they do everything right, 9-3 isn't going to cut it. We've already seen last year in the college football playoffs, it was hard to set a precedent for a 9-3 team. We have a bunch of 10-2s or 11-1s that are in front of you. So how can Clemson bounce back? It's very hard. But when you look at their schedule, they do have a very favorable schedule. They have North Carolina, Boston College, SMU, Duke, and one of the biggest games that will help them out, if anything, is right now currently ranked 18 Florida State, and who knows how they'll look. And that's a game at home. So it works out in your favor. And then you have to beat Louisville, Furman, and ultimately South Carolina. But as this goes right now, this is by far one of the most disappointing seasons we've seen and one of the most disappointing teams we've seen this season, especially with all the hype that they had coming in. It looks like Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers were just drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much and have to figure out how to bounce back. Now, there were two teams so far in this midway point of the season who've completely sold me. They got me drinking their Kool-Aid and they got me believing they can win their conference titles and be top seeds in their college football playoff seeding. And that's the Miami Hurricanes and the Ole Miss Rebels. I want to touch on Miami first. Miami currently sits at 4-0, 0-0 in conference play. They'll jump into that this week. But my big two questions I have for this team going into the season is how well will Carson Beck look post elbow injury, and how well will this defense look after looking terrible all last year, giving up big plays? And honestly, I got my answer in week 1. As much as skeptical as I wanted to be, when I saw this team out there, it looked like a whole new team. Miami's offense looked phenomenal. Behind Mark Fletcher at running back and splitting carries with Jamar Brown, they were a 1-2 combo. And even Carson Beck having weapons in Tony and Daniels and how fast and efficient this offense looked, everything has looked great for them. But on the defensive side of the ball, this team was known for giving up big plays last year. Well, you have Mesidor coming back. You have Ruben Bain there, who's probably going to have some hardware hanging up in his locker room by the end of this year if he keeps playing the way he does. They've looked anything but short of phenomenal. Then the real question was that secondary. Miami was known for giving up the big play downfield. Well, Mario Cristobal goes in the transfer portal and he gets a whole bunch of guys, and this defense looks vastly different. It's like night and day. One of the biggest transfer portal additions they get was Xavier Lucas, and I know he went through a lot of things within leaving Wisconsin, but it's worked out for those guys. Miami has done everything they needed to do to look good in this first month and a half of football, in this first 2 months of football, if we're going to be honest, as we head into October. The bigger thing that everyone wonders about is Miami's resume. They have one of the best resumes among a lot of teams in the college football, especially in the ACC so far. Well, if you really want to ask those questions here, let's break it down. They play a ranked Notre Dame team. They defeat a ranked South Florida team, and they get a good win over Florida. And you may ask yourselves, well, Florida wasn't a good team. Why is that important? Because at the time of that game, Florida just came off a loss to the ranked South Florida team. So now you've bolstered your resume to look good. And as you get prepared to turn to this week 6, where you have to go in Tallahassee to play Florida State, if you win that game, you have by far one of the best resumes in college football. And it's nothing short of amazing. But one thing we know about Miami is that they can fall into trap games when we get into the late October, November stage. And this bottom half of the schedule, although it's favorable, it isn't a slouch. If they go beat Florida State, they can't get caught in the trap game playing Louisville the following week. They can't take Stanford for any lack of better terms of a slight cakewalk. SMU has Rhett Lashley, and this team was a college football playoff team a year ago. You play Syracuse, who ended up beating Clemson this past 2 weeks ago. So you have a lot that's in store. And then you have NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt, who may not have the best seasons right now, but doesn't mean that they're not good teams. So Miami has to find a way to not get caught sleeping and napping and play for the games that aren't the biggest matchups on paper. They can't get caught sleeping. We know they'll be awake for Florida State, but for the rest of that schedule, you can't get caught starting slow and you can't get caught laying down. But Miami has fully sold me as being a team that can win the ACC and put themselves as a top seed in the college football playoffs. Another team that has sold me through 5 games is Ole Miss, and I'm all aboard the lane train, baby. This team has looked fantastic, and they've gone into games and dominated. My biggest question for them was how would they look in the post-Jackson Dart era? And we all thought we would insert 19-year-old Austin Simmons, who would have some growing pains, but unfortunately he gets hurt against Kentucky, and along comes this guy by the name of Trinidad Chambliss, and we're all wondering, where did Lane Kiffin find this guy? He's a D2 quarterback from Fair State University, and he's not just some regular guy. If you dive deeper into his resume, this guy has some merit. He played in the D2 National Championship. He wore the Harlan Hill Award, which is the equivalent to the Heisman on the Division II level. This kid is a baller. You insert him, and he's averaging 300 yards per game, and he's putting up a couple touchdowns each time, and he does it on the ground. So all the questions that I had about this team offensively was solved. Now, if Lane keeps riding this train with Trinidad Chambliss, and I don't see him losing his job anytime soon, even with Austin Simmons healthy, this team is on the right path to win themselves a SEC championship berth. Now, could they win the title? I don't know. But also, they could put themselves in a prime position to be in the playoffs again. And what made this team so interesting is that each week we've seen this defense improve. And this past weekend against LSU, they go in there and they dominate. It's a home game, and LSU didn't even look like they belonged on the field with that defense, creating turnovers, creating miscues, creating a lot of mistakes for this LSU offense. And it's been very impressive to see. Now, if you're Ole Miss, you have a very difficult schedule ahead of you. You got to take on, at currently, you have a slight advantage when you go up against Washington State, let's be honest here. So you should win that game. But those next 2 games after that aren't games you could just laugh at. You got to play Georgia on the road, and you got to play number 5 Oklahoma on the road, which are 2 teams that are really good. But when you look at the remaining schedule after that, South Carolina has been really decent, but it's a winnable game. Citadel, that should be a wash and a win. And Florida, although the defense is really great, the offense has struggled behind DJ Lagway. So what will that team look like when you get closer and closer to it? And then you cap it off against Mississippi State behind that Jeff Levy team and Blake Shapen. So all around, this team is very good. And I got to be honest with this team right now. I'm very surprised at how efficiently they look once you insert in Trinidad Chambliss in that quarterback and how well the defense has improved week in and week out. This, again, is a team that could make a SEC championship berth, and we could see them playing for a college football playoff. And one last team that passed my vibe check, and they really confirmed any suspicion that I had, was the Oregon Ducks. And I have one name to thank for that: Dante Moore. Now, we all know about Dante Moore, and if you don't, he started at UCLA as a true freshman 2 years ago. He transfers to Oregon. He's going to back up Dylan Gabriel. He sees the field maybe, 5 games throughout the season. So we don't really know much about him. But this kid looks different, and this kid's balled out. And what confirmed everything that I needed to see was this past weekend, going into Happy Valley in a whiteout and having the composure this kid has had to make any throw across the field. These arm angles. There was a play where he rolls out to his right to extend the play and then throws it across his body to the middle of the field and gets the first down, putting the Oregon Ducks in prime position to go down the field and put up a touchdown. This kid is a baller. And the Oregon Ducks as a whole was a team that behind closed doors, I was telling a bunch of people, I could see them repeating as Big Ten champions. I could see them playing in that title game again. And what the game they just played last week was a Big Ten title fight. We got to see it on display. Penn State, although they were down, they were never out. They drug back in there. And Dante Moore having the composure, not just for one overtime, but two of those things, and go there and get the job done. I'm sold on the Oregon Ducks. I've always have been, but they confirmed any suspicion that I've had. When you look at Dante Moore and when he played, he never looks like the moment's too big or too high. He's very calm. He has an even kill demeanor, and the guys rally behind him. There was a lot of questions going about Oregon that centered around him and building the roster that fits the needs that he doesn't have and what lacked. But even the receiving core has been good. True freshman DeCorian Moore has been phenomenal. And when you're Oregon, right now, you're sitting at the top of the Big Ten. Your only real worry is Penn State, and you just conquered that monster. The rest of your schedule doesn't look that bad. They have to play Indiana at home, which is very favorable for them. Then they go up against Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota. USC will be another true test, and Washington. But you don't have to see an Ohio State. You don't have to see a Michigan. So your schedule looks really good. I can see this team in the playoffs again. I can see this team as a number one seed again. I can see this team being a national championship contending team. They confirmed any suspicions that I had about them. I always had this small confidence about them. But seeing this confirmed everything I needed to see. And I'm a full believer of this Dan Lanning Oregon Ducks team this year. I'm all in on them. So there you guys have it. That's my midseason vibe check. Next time you'll see me again, I'll have a video of if I were the committee, where now we're getting closer. The AP rankings are going to start mattering less and less. And once we get the first official college football playoff rankings, I'll be right here with the guest and we'll sit and we'll talk. And if the committee got it right, and what will we do? Who will we rank over who? Where do teams belong? And we'll start looking at resumes. So until next time, I'm Darius Brockett. You guys can follow me on Brockett Media on all platforms, and I'll see you guys at the next video.